They were called parties, but they were actually chaotic, bizarre, and mandatory. We expose the most shocking social spectacles of the Golden Age, revealing the silent contracts and public betrayals hidden beneath the champagne and the shimmering gold. The Kingdom by the Sea, Marian Davies, and the Golden Cage of Glamour. Beyond the velvet rope of Hollywood, a beachfront palace arose, a kingdom built by William Randolph Hearst on love and staggering influence. This was Marian Davies's mansion, where Tinseltown royalty gathered, and where every laugh carried a hidden, persistent hint of control. To be invited was to step not into a party, but into a dream, carefully curated by the age's most powerful figures, designed to protect the star at all costs. Marian Davies, one of the brightest screen stars of the 1920s and 30s, possessed a natural charm and a genuine comedic talent that should have cemented her legacy purely through her films. Yet her story is forever entwined with William Randolph Hearst, the towering publishing magnate. He adored her with an unyielding devotion, but that love was inseparable from his desire to control her life and destiny, crafting her career as meticulously as he crafted his newspaper empire. This dynamic was the unspoken script of her entire public life, turning her immense social scene into a strategic business venture, managed with the precision of a national budget. Hearst saw her not just as a lover, but as a prized possession to be flawlessly displayed. His approval was the highest social currency, and his wealth was the engine driving their colossal social presence. The palace itself was an architectural declaration of his ownership and power, meant to rival any royal European residence, a tangible symbol of their inescapable bond. This wealth ensured that anything Hearst wanted for Marian, regardless of Hollywood's opinion, would materialize. In 1929, to solidify their life together and make a statement to the world, Hearst built Davies a breathtaking beachfront mansion in Santa Monica. It was a home so extravagant it stretched across 4 city blocks, complete with guest houses, expansive gardens, and a private theater. It was, as one observer noted, a modern-day royal court on the Pacific coast, a staggering display of devotion that few could rival. Its sheer size was a testament to the magnitude of Hearst's ego and affection, a monument dedicated to a single, beloved woman, costing millions of dollars in that era alone, designed to crush all competition. The mansion stood as a concrete symbol of their complicated, powerful relationship, an elaborate shell of glamour. The social landscape of Hollywood literally bent itself around the events hosted within those walls. The lavishness was designed to ensure Marian's name was synonymous not just with film, but with ultimate, unattainable wealth. No expense was spared to maintain the illusion that Marian was the reigning monarch of Southern California society. This mansion became the setting for the most lavish gatherings of Hollywood's golden age. The guest list was a constellation of stars: Clark Gable, the King, Douglas Fairbanks, the Swashbuckler, and even the great Charlie Chaplin were regulars. Guests lounged by the shimmering pool, dined in grand halls of impeccable style, and watched private screenings in Marian's own picture house. One esteemed actress, Bette Davis, recalled arriving and feeling as if she had stepped entirely into another, more glittering world where the rules of normal society simply did not apply. The air was thick with power and the scent of expensive perfume, and the mood it was one of sustained, effortless fantasy. The sheer scale of the operation left guests breathless, an intentional effect orchestrated by Hearst. But these gatherings were not just spontaneous moments of fun. They were carefully orchestrated performances. Hearst ensured his beloved Marian remained the undisputed center of attention, quietly steering conversations or discouraging any rival from shining too brightly. The spectacle was paramount. One guest described arriving to find a live menagerie on the lawn, exotic animals brought in merely to delight and impress the company. Orchestras played late into the night, while reporters outside scrambled, trying to capture even a glimpse of the grandeur within. The whole event served as both a social coup and an advertising campaign for Marian's latest film. The underlying tension was always present, masked only by the laughter and the flow of the finest champagne, as guests understood the unspoken rules of the court. A columnist for the Los Angeles Press put it eloquently, writing, "To be invited to Marian's was to step into another world, a world where even the Pacific seemed to bow before Hearst's fortune. This perception of immense, almost divine power was exactly what Hearst intended to project, solidifying his domain over both media and film society. Beneath the dazzling glitter of these nights, however, lay a more fragile truth. Marian, though adored and indulged, often felt overshadowed by Hearst's empire and his towering expectations. Her opulent parties became the perfect symbol of Hollywood's deep-seated contradiction, dizzying freedom and dazzling surface glamour, with a quiet, persistent control beneath. As the waves crashed against the shore, the laughter that filled her magnificent mansion carried both joy and an undeniable hint of melancholy. Her immense wealth could not buy her true independence from the man who loved her so completely, and the golden cage felt very real, despite the chandeliers and the champagne. This tension between adoration and ambition makes her one of the Golden Age's most poignant figures. This palace by the sea was a stage where the lines between performance and reality dissolved. While Davies lived out a magnificent fairy tale under watchful eyes, another towering figure in Tinseltown was controlling his stars with a far more internal, obsessive method, the power of suffocating silence. Howard Hughes's obsessive midnight screenings. The strangeness of Howard Hughes's screenings was not the subject matter, but the suffocating silence. He was the elusive billionaire, the pioneering aviator, and the most unpredictable man in Hollywood. When Hughes invited guests to a party, it wasn't for champagne and dancing. It was for a strange, silent test of endurance, watching the same scene spin endlessly into the desert night. If some Hollywood parties were wild, and others were purely glamorous, Hughes's gatherings were something else entirely. Obsessive, intense, and unforgettable in their own way. By the 1930s, Hughes was already known to the world as a financial titan, a playboy, and a record-breaking aviation pioneer when he turned his attention to the film industry. His cinematic ventures, from Hell's Angels to The Outlaw, were notoriously costly, ambitious, and often fraught with controversy. But it was the way he worked that made his private screenings legendary. His meticulous, demanding nature was applied to everything he touched, from aviation design to a simple dinner invitation. Guests, a mix of actors and friends, would be invited to his home or a private theater under the promise of cocktails and conversation. Instead, they found themselves seated before a projector, while Hughes screened rough cuts of his films. He would watch silently from the back, scribbling notes in the darkness, sometimes replaying the exact same reel over and over until the sun began to rise over Los Angeles. This process could last up to 14 hours, completely exhausting the invited professionals. And leaving early was simply unthinkable. Friends and contract players were expected to stay, no matter how long the process lasted. One actor who endured the experience recalled the profound strangeness of it, hours passing in silence as the studio's most powerful figures sat captive, while Hughes muttered to himself about lighting, camera angles, or minute costume details. It wasn't a party, he later quipped. It was a test of endurance. The tension in the room was palpable, sustained only by the collective fear of incurring the billionaire's wrath, a financial and creative risk no one dared to take. The atmosphere was less creative collaboration and more solitary confinement, dictated by one man's singular fixation on perfection. To attend was to submit entirely to Hughes's artistic tyranny, trading one's social evening for a night of psychological pressure and professional scrutiny. This was his ultimate form of control over Tinseltown's elite, performed with unnerving quiet. No one left until Hughes himself had reached his own inscrutable conclusion, a moment often delayed until sunup. The star power in the room, a fusion of talent and money, was rendered completely powerless by his eccentric authority. While Frank Sinatra's parties roared with laughter, and Errol Flynn's echoed with boisterous music, Hughes's evenings were quiet, intense, and profoundly isolating. They were not about shared joy. They were about absolute control. Control over the creative process, control over his time, and control over his increasingly silent audience. The experience offered a clear, unvarnished truth about the man himself, a figure of undeniable brilliance wrapped in a deepening mantle of solitude, finding refuge in the meticulous perfection of the cinema. We always love hearing from you. Tell us, which Hollywood director or producer do you think was the most uniquely demanding of their stars? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Over time, Hughes's legendary eccentricities grew darker, his screenings fewer, until he became the almost mythical recluse whose final chapter fascinated the world. But those who remembered the midnight screenings never forgot them. They were bizarre in their own unique way, gatherings where some of Hollywood's most important players sat captive to one man's singular vision, watching the same reel spin endlessly into the quiet of the night. The irony was profound. Hughes controlled his guests through isolation. But in stark contrast, the heads of MGM controlled their stars with blinding light and undeniable obligation. Find out how L.B. Mayer turned a party into a required, contractual command performance. A grand coronation, the MGM lot parties, and the iron fist of L.B. Mayer. In the 1930s, one studio mogul dared to outshine the heavens. Louis B. Mayer transformed the MGM lot itself into a fantastical stage, commissioning themed extravaganzas where elephants lumbered past sound stages and contract players performed, reminding everyone that in Hollywood, even a party was a command performance. The message was clear. MGM was the biggest, the grandest, and the most powerful force in Hollywood. MGM proudly declared it had more stars than there are in heaven, and its parties were designed to be as grand and overwhelming as the finest films it produced. When Mayer, the studio's undisputed, iron-fisted mogul, decided to celebrate, he didn't settle for cocktails in a modest drawing room. He turned the colossal studio lot into his personal theater, a glittering stage intended to outshine any rival, particularly the competitors at Warner Brothers or Paramount. The purpose was to project an image of unstoppable, opulent domination to both the public and his rivals. Mayer understood that image and spectacle were the true currencies of his empire. MGM's galas were legendary for their sheer scale. To truly demonstrate his dominance, Mayer commissioned themed extravaganzas that seemed pulled directly from the pages of fantasy. There was the famous Circus Gala, a night when the very sound stages became a carnival. Guests dined on caviar, while lions and acrobats performed only a few feet away, and elephants lumbered across the pavement. The studio's dozens of contract players paraded in elaborate, sequined costumes. The level of synchronized spectacle rivaled the most complex musical numbers shot on the lot. The meticulous planning ensured a flawless execution, leaving no room for spontaneity or genuine dissent among the ranks. The entire event was a testament to the studio's vertical integration, where even the real life was produced by MGM. Reporters lucky enough to slip through the guarded gates described the parties as surreal, half carnival, half coronation. Even the animals, it seemed, were under contract. One astute columnist quipped that the events felt less like indulgences and more like essential industry rituals, all designed to showcase the endless resources and unwavering power of the studio chief. Attending these galas was deemed just as important as showing up for a major film shoot. It was a crucial part of the relentless marketing machine. Mayer's obsession with control extended deeply into these festivities. Every star under contract, from the luminous ingenues to the established veterans, was expected to attend, smile flawlessly for the photographers, and play their part in Hollywood's carefully constructed fantasy. Attendance wasn't a choice, it was part of the job. For the studio's most important assets, maintaining favor with the man who held the key to their future was paramount, and they were keenly aware that their careers depended on playing their roles perfectly, even after the cameras stopped rolling. The penalty for absence or visible unhappiness was severe and immediate. This was the cost of belonging to Hollywood's most prestigious, yet restrictive, empire. The studio enforced a level of discipline that extended beyond the set, ensuring their stars remained perfectly polished cultural products, even at a supposed leisure event. Beneath the enormous spotlights and the tinsel, there was, for many, a distinct sense of strain. While guests from the outside marveled at the sheer spectacle, dancers twirling under enormous spotlights, or the sight of exotic animals wandering through carefully designed sets, some performers quietly admitted the evenings felt more like obligations than genuine celebrations. The need to be seen, to be gracious, and to constantly uphold the image of unreachable glamour was exhausting, a stark reminder of their professional servitude. The applause felt mandatory, the smiles contractual, and the relief only arrived with the dawn. Still, to those on the outside, and to Hollywood historians looking back, the MGM lot bashes symbolized the era's ultimate spectacle. They blurred the line between the cinematic and the real, reminding the world that in Mayer's domain, even the most elaborate gathering felt like a movie, bustling, rigidly controlled, and undeniably larger than life. The MGM bashes proved that the rigid studio system could even turn merriment into duty. It was a stark contrast to the brilliant antidote of figures like Tallulah Bankhead, who used her gatherings as a stage for joyful, radical, unapologetic freedom. The joy of glorious chaos, Tallulah Bankhead's irreverent soirees. She swept into a room like a storm, magnetic, unpredictable, and entirely unapologetic. Tallulah Bankhead, a star whose wit was as sharp as her stage presence, used her infamous parties not just for fun, but as a statement of defiance against Hollywood's rigid, controlling rules. The goal was to shock the cautious establishment and delight her most liberated friends. Tallulah Bankhead was one of Hollywood's great glorious originals, a stage and screen actress whose life was as theatrical as any role she ever played. By the 1930s, she had carved out a reputation as a bold and utterly unapologetic performer. She was famous for her distinctively gravelly voice, her quick quips, and, most importantly, for living exactly as she pleased, regardless of the expectations of polite society or her studio bosses. Her gatherings became a perfect, living reflection of her personality, playful, mischievous, and just a little outrageous. Guests might arrive at her home to find poker tables set up in every corner, expensive drinks flowing long after midnight, and Tallulah herself presiding over the chaos like a mischievous queen. She delighted in defying every rule of social propriety, forcing Hollywood's most meticulously guarded stars to let down their guard. The environment was one of liberated, unscripted abandon. She had no patience for the hypocrisy of Tinseltown and used her home as a sanctuary from its endless expectations and suffocating morality. The most legendary of these gatherings was her famous pajama party. Tallulah reportedly insisted that every guest arrive dressed for bed, no matter their celebrity or their standing in society. Laughter and whispers filled the night as Hollywood's most glamorous names, stars like Marlene Dietrich and others, sat cross-legged in silk sleepwear, sipping cocktails, and trading jokes as though they were children at a sophisticated slumber party. This simple dress code was a masterful stroke of social subversion. It forced the removal of the rigid, formal evening wear that symbolized the studio's control, revealing the human beneath the velvet. The sight of Hollywood's elite in their sleeping attire was a visual manifesto against conformity. For Tallulah, that was the ultimate joy, stripping away the pretense and forcing everyone to embrace the absurd, simple humanity of the moment. Her sharp tongue and her utterly liberated way of life made her beloved by her closest friends and deeply feared by the cautious Hollywood establishment who viewed her independence with suspicion. When asked about her famously untamed and spirited ways, she simply laughed and declared a line that became legend. "If I had to live my life again, I'd make all the same mistakes, only sooner." She relished her reputation as a boundary pusher, a genuine voice in a town of manufactured smiles, and a woman who refused to be contained by a studio contract. Her self-assurance was intoxicating to her circle. Behind the bravado and the joyous chaos, there was always a profound sense of defiance. Bankhead was a woman who resisted the industry's continuous attempts to define her and box her into a neat, respectable category. Her parties were more than mere social events. They were loud, glorious statements, declarations of her freedom to live, to laugh, and to shock. The environment she created was one of rare, unscripted abandon. For those lucky and bold enough to attend, a night at Tallulah's was a vivid reminder that Hollywood wasn't always about rigid control or carefully staged spectacle. Sometimes, the true magic was found in the chaos, in the undeniable charm, and in the sheer, exhilarating joy of being perfectly and unapologetically alive. Her defiance provided a much-needed breath of fresh, chaotic air to the rigid studio system. The dark side of daring, Errol Flynn's reckless Mulholland House gatherings. He was the swashbuckling hero of the silver screen, the man who leapt from ships, drew his sword, and charmed audiences with a dashing smile. But off-screen, Errol Flynn's legend grew just as large, centered in a Mulholland Drive mansion where glamour tipped into chaos and secret passages hinted at a life lived with reckless abandon. The house itself became an unforgettable piece of Hollywood folklore, a fortress against boredom and convention. The world knew Errol Flynn as the definitive swashbuckling hero, the magnetic star of films like The Adventures of Robin Hood. He projected an image of effortless daring and pure, unbridled adventure. Yet, The private life he cultivated in his Mulholland Drive residence was an attempt to make the spectacle of his films a reality, but often with a darker, more chaotic energy. Built in the 1930s, the hillside house was architecturally imposing, designed to stand apart from the world, much like a medieval keep. It was here, within those walls, that Flynn entertained with a profound lack of restraint, hosting wild, all-night gatherings that attracted everyone from fellow actors like John Barrymore to celebrated musicians and Hollywood insiders. The environment was one of constant, escalating excitement and hedonistic indulgence, a whirlwind of beautiful people and endless revelry. The parties were an extension of his most daring on-screen stunts transposed into his private world. The parties themselves were legendary for their reckless abandon. Costumes were often worn, themes were elaborate, and the laughter and music frequently continued until the first rays of morning light. But it was the lore of the house itself that captured Hollywood's imagination, cementing its place in history. Rumors circulated freely about the architectural secrets of the residence. Stories of secret passages that connected rooms and whispered details of hidden peepholes strategically placed in the walls quickly became part of the enduring folklore. While some details may have been exaggeration or playful embellishment, they were repeated so often that they became accepted truth, contributing to Flynn's aura of a man constantly living on the edge. The mystery was a vital part of his persona, sustained by his own theatrical suggestions and the complicity of his famous guests. Flynn, the consummate showman, seemed to thoroughly enjoy fanning the flames of his own legend. He understood that the mystery surrounding his life was as valuable as his box office success. When challenged or questioned about his untamed reputation, he offered lines that played directly into the myth, such as his notorious quip, "I like my whiskey old and my women young." He actively embraced and amplified the image of the dashing rogue, ensuring his personal life remained as dramatic as his films. The line between the heroic actor and the troubled playboy was constantly blurred, creating a myth that outlived the man. For his guests, the mansion and its parties offered an exhilarating sense of escape from the often suffocating morality of the public eye. But for Flynn, the endless pursuit of spectacle carried a profound personal cost. The fortress on the hill became an almost literal manifestation of his own attempt to outrun the expectations of stardom and avoid the loneliness that often accompanied such fame. He was constantly searching for a distraction that even the wildest party could not provide, a deeper human connection. His relentless pursuit of excitement was ultimately a desperate form of self-medication against the pressures of being an icon, leading to an unsustainable pace of life. His parties were a tragic effort to maintain the illusion of control and happiness, a frantic chase after a lost moment of youthful joy. The stories of what truly happened inside that secluded Mulholland home will always be veiled in mystery. They remind us that for the most charismatic stars, the lines between the performance on screen and the chaotic, reckless reality of their private lives often completely disappeared. While Flynn pursued reckless chaos in a physical fortress, a group of stars built a different kind of inner circle, using camaraderie and influence to exert their power from a desert playground. Up next, Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. Brotherhood under the desert moon, the Rat Pack's Palm Springs headquarters. In the desert heat of Palm Springs, under skies full of stars, Frank Sinatra built a retreat that became the unofficial headquarters of the Rat Pack. If Hollywood was the stage, Palm Springs was the playground. When Sinatra threw a party, it was an event everyone remembered, a legendary blend of cool sophistication, camaraderie, and unrestrained mischief. By the 1950s, Sinatra had reinvented himself from a popular crooner into an Academy Award-winning actor and the undisputed leader of his inner circle. Alongside him were the incomparable talents of Dean Martin, the dazzling energy of Sammy Davis Jr., and the sharp wit of Joey Bishop and Peter Lawford. Together, they embodied a potent mix of glamour and devil-may-care attitude that defined mid-century cool, true demonstration of American swagger. Sinatra's Palm Springs estate, with its unforgettable, signature piano-shaped swimming pool, became the backdrop for countless nights of music, laughter, and organized chaos. Guests recalled seeing tuxedo-clad men and launching water balloon fights in the arid desert air, only to end the night huddled around a piano, while Martin or Sinatra serenaded them with classic standards until the moment the sun broke over the surrounding mountains. The atmosphere was one of electric creativity, fueled by their mutual admiration and talent. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with a sense that history was happening in real time. Politicians mingled freely with actors, powerful socialites brushed shoulders with musicians, and the very air was thick with influence. Sinatra, ever the meticulous and generous host, insisted that no one leave hungry, thirsty, or unentertained. But these parties were about more than just hijinks and humor. They carried a significant weight. Dean Martin once remarked that it was never work with Frank, it was family. That feeling of absolute loyalty and unwavering camaraderie was the true currency of the gatherings. The men teased one another like brothers, turning practical jokes into high art, yet they maintained an absolute devotion to the core unit. This unbreakable bond was the source of their collective cultural and political power. Deals were struck not in boardrooms, but over a relaxed, late-night card game, cementing allegiances that shaped the entertainment landscape for decades. Behind the humor and the shimmering lights, the gathering symbolized immense power. Deals were quietly struck, influential alliances were subtly forged, and careers were made or broken with a casual conversation. A friendly word from the chairman of the board at his Palm Springs home could send ripples not just through Hollywood, but even as far as Washington. The Rat Pack knew that their combined power was undeniable, and their parties were a show of force, dressed up in black tie glamour. For those who were fortunate enough to be invited into that exclusive circle, the nights at Sinatra's retreat captured the true essence of mid-century power. It was an intoxicating blend of dazzling showmanship and genuine affection, where the line between private pleasure and professional strategy was perfectly blurred. The parties proved that in this elite circle, loyalty was just as valuable as talent, and where, under the vast, silent desert moon, Hollywood's most powerful brotherhood lived larger than life. The legend they created was one of effortless dominance, built on skill and mutual respect. The Rat Pack cultivated sophisticated brotherhood, but in stark contrast, two of Hollywood's greatest titans used their parties to stage a public, dazzling performance of passion and staggering wealth. We go inside Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton's famous diamond coronation. A grand coronation. Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and the 69-carat declaration. She was Hollywood royalty, violet-eyed, magnetic, and fiercely extravagant. When Elizabeth Taylor celebrated, it was not merely a party, it was a coronation. Her infamous birthday in 1969 became the stuff of legend when Richard Burton offered a gift worthy of a queen. A diamond so massive, it was less a jewel and more a declaration of their tempestuous, passionate love. Taylor had grown from a luminous child star into a two-time Academy Award winner, and her life was perhaps the most closely watched drama of the era. At the heart of her story was her profound and tumultuous romance with the great Welsh actor Richard Burton. Their love affair burned hotter and brighter than any spotlight, fueled by grand passion, dramatic arguments, passionate reconciliations, and an absolute shared affinity for the opulent. When Burton set out to honor Elizabeth's birthday in 1969, he knew he had to secure a gift he felt was truly worthy of her stature. He chose to acquire a rough diamond of nearly 250 carats, which was then cut into a magnificent pear shape. At her party, amidst the laughter, the fine champagne, and the hum of Hollywood's international elite, Burton presented Elizabeth with a jewel that became instantly famous and redefined the meaning of the grand gesture, the 69-carat Taylor Burton diamond. It glittered under the chandeliers like a star of its own, and in that incandescent moment, it seemed to capture everything about its wearer, dazzling, rare, and impossible to ignore. Elizabeth herself embraced the drama of it all. She once declared with her characteristic brilliant smile, "Big girls need big diamonds." It was a line that would follow her forever, serving as much as a symbol of her celebrated wit as it was of her magnificent appetite for life's grandest statements. The entire evening transcended the concept of a simple birthday celebration. It was about the theater of love, about a couple whose deep, complicated passion played out publicly for the entire world to witness. The event confirmed that their relationship was perhaps the greatest, most spectacular performance of their careers, perfectly merging reality and publicity. Guests recalled an atmosphere of absolute awe, a sense that they were witnessing not just a birthday, but a symbolic coronation of Hollywood's true reigning queen. The diamond at her throat was the undeniable, physical proof of her unparalleled celebrity. Yet, even in the glow of such immense wealth and devotion, there was always a familiar shadow. Taylor's life, much like her relationship with Burton, was as turbulent as it was glamorous. Her great joys often matched by her equally intense struggles. The presentation was a moment of crystalline perfection in a famously chaotic relationship, a brief pause in the drama. The sheer size of the gift left no doubt that their love was a force recognized and valued on a global scale, capable of stopping the world. Still, on that unforgettable night, with that enormous diamond glittering at her throat and laughter echoing around her, Elizabeth Taylor embodied the sheer, breathtaking extravagance of the golden age, beauty, profound love, and enduring legend, all wrapped in a spectacular declaration of brilliance. Which of these legendary Hollywood parties would you have most wanted to attend? Drop your answer below and let us know if you're Team Glamour, Team Chaos, or Team Rebellion. While the Burtons used their parties to stage a dazzling theater of love, another influential figure was orchestrating a social spectacle to solidify his own position within the world of high society. A masterpiece of power and meticulous exclusion. Up next, the black and white ball. The perfect spectacle. Truman Capote and the black and white ball. On one November night in 1966, an author managed to stage what was immediately dubbed the party of the century. Beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel, Truman Capote gathered the world's most powerful people for a masked, monochrome spectacle. A testament to Hollywood glamour merging with high society. The unspoken goal, proving who mattered in the 1960s. Capote had just published his towering literary work, In Cold Blood, and with his fame at its absolute peak, he decided to transition from mere celebrated author to undisputed social maestro. His ball, ostensibly held in honor of publisher Katharine Graham, was in reality a carefully managed performance designed to solidify his own position as the ultimate insider. He was an architect of celebrity, and the 500 people who received an invitation were his chosen, glittering elite. His guest list was a surgical instrument of social engineering. Every name chosen represented a strategic alliance or a coveted prize. But for every celebrated guest, there were countless powerful socialites and stars who did not receive the coveted golden ticket. To be included was a validation of status. To be left off was a social affront that wounded pride and fueled bitter gossip for weeks. The power of exclusion was Capote's true weapon that night, wielded with ruthless precision. To make the night truly striking, Capote demanded that every guest adhere to a strict dress code, black and white only, including tuxedos, grand gowns, and, most importantly, masks. The effect was breathtaking. The Plaza's grand ballroom became a magnificent, shimmering sea of monochrome elegance, with the light from the chandeliers reflecting off satin and silk. It was a visual masterpiece, simple in concept, yet unparalleled in execution. A perfect, carefully constructed canvas of power. The monochromatic mandate ensured that the guests, despite their fame, served only to highlight the brilliance of Capote's staging. Reporters scrambled outside the hotel to document who was arriving, recognizing that the very act of attending cemented a person's place in the social history of the decade. The gossip columnists whispered that the night blurred the lines between the worlds of film, politics, and literature, uniting different spheres that rarely collided so perfectly. Capote, the architect of this dazzling environment, moved among his guests like a masterful conductor, ensuring every moment struck the right, sophisticated note. A reporter from the New York Times, overwhelmed by the spectacle, simply declared, "It was the party of the century." And yet, even in its profound triumph, the ball hinted at Capote's own deep-seated contradictions. The man who so desperately sought genuine intimacy and quiet companionship spent the entire evening orchestrating spectacle, surrounding himself with immense power and fame. He created a temporary, perfect world, even as he distanced himself from the messy, emotional reality he often longed for. The price of social perfection was often personal isolation, a truth veiled by the mask. The ultimate insider often felt like the ultimate outsider looking in, watching his own performance unfold. The meticulous planning required to achieve such perfection was exhausting, a kind of self-imposed artistic tyranny. Capote's black and white ball remains the definitive statement on the allure and absurdity of American celebrity, perfectly encapsulating the social hunger of the jet set. Still, the black and white ball remains a powerful landmark in social history. It proved that for one spectacular masked night, ambition could be perfectly disguised as elegance, and that the greatest celebrity figures, from Elizabeth Taylor to Humphrey Bogart, understood the absolute, undeniable power of a social theater. This sense of glorious, unbridled freedom from social rules was mirrored in a different kind of gathering, a unique Hollywood haven where film stars mingled freely with the literary giants. Up next, the Garden of Allah, the sins and the chlorine. The Garden of Allah and the dimming of Hollywood's lights. It wasn't a mansion, and it wasn't quite a hotel. It was something stranger, a sprawling Mediterranean compound where the bright lights of Hollywood dimmed and the rigid rules of the studio system dissolved. This was the Garden of Allah, the beating heart of nightlife, where writers and stars often ended the evening diving into the pool, fully clothed. The only rule was to shed your pretense. The story of the Garden of Allah began with silent film star Alla Nazimova, who converted her luxurious home into a hotel in 1927. It quickly became far more than just a place to sleep. It was a haven, an escape from the relentless scrutiny of Hollywood. And for nearly 3 decades, it was the place where stars went to live, to drink, and to forget their troubles. The hotel was designed with villas, lush gardens, and a distinctive, shimmering pool that became its iconic centerpiece. That pool was the stage for countless stories and countless legends. Writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Dorothy Parker, escaping the pressures of the East Coast, mingled freely with actors such as Humphrey Bogart, Errol Flynn, and the enigmatic Marlene Dietrich. The evenings there were known for their sheer spontaneity and lack of adherence to any social convention. Often, the late-night revelry concluded with guests, still in their tuxedos or their grand gowns, taking a defiant, chaotic leap into the water, their laughter echoing across Sunset Boulevard. This tradition was the ultimate sign that, for one night, the celebrity facade had been cheerfully abandoned, embracing pure, messy humanity. This was the spirit of the Garden of Allah, a unique place where the formality of the studio system was washed away. One Hollywood wit once remarked that the pool was the most chlorine-filled in town, a necessary measure to cleanse away all the sins committed in it. That line perfectly captured the garden's notorious reputation as a place of joyful, unapologetic excess. The Garden of Allah was also a rare sanctuary for the literary crowd. It was one of the few places in Los Angeles where novelists and witty screenwriters traded ideas with famous musicians and actors, creating an intoxicating and unpredictable creative environment. It was messy, chaotic, and entirely unlike the polished, perfect image Hollywood tried so desperately to project. For the stars, the garden was a priceless gift. It was a sanctuary where they could truly live without the constant, watchful eye of their studio bosses, a place where their public persona could be temporarily set aside for genuine human connection and shared folly. The sense of liberation was palpable, a temporary escape from the pressures of fame, where they could simply be themselves among equals. The pool became the great equalizer, washing away the carefully constructed images of celebrity and status. The garden provided the chaos that the disciplined stars craved, offering a vital respite from their relentless professional duties. It was a last bastion of bohemian freedom before the era of corporate control fully descended upon Hollywood. The hotel walls truly had ears, but the guests simply stopped caring about who was listening, prioritizing their fleeting freedom over their public image. When the Garden of Allah was finally demolished in 1959, a profound sense of melancholy swept through the community. Many felt that an era had ended. The parties had been wild, the nights were unrepeatable, and the stories unforgettable. For those who had known it, the Garden of Allah wasn't merely a hotel. It was a tangible piece of Hollywood's soul, a symbol of artistic freedom and reckless fun, tragically lost to time, but never to memory. The Garden of Allah was a symbol of artistic and personal freedom. While the stars here sought to shed their rigid image, another star was building a monument to maintain her own larger-than-life persona, creating a legacy that was visually unforgettable. Up next, Jane Mansfield and the Pink Palace. The Carnival Queen, Jane Mansfield's Pink Palace and the Theater of Excess. If Elizabeth Taylor was Hollywood's queen, Jane Mansfield was its unforgettable carnival princess. In the 1950s and 60s, her Beverly Hills home became a surreal dream in shades of rose, where everything, from the furniture to the heart-shaped, gold-tiled pool, was part of a magnificent, theatrical performance. The house itself was, in every way, a monument to her spectacular brand of celebrity. The Pink Palace, as it came to be called, was exactly what its name suggested, a mansion dipped in shades of rose and pink. Everything inside seemed to match the audacious theme. The carpets, the curtains, the walls, and even the champagne served to the guests. Mansfield, the ultimate blonde bombshell, understood the importance of image, and she made her home the ultimate reflection of her carefully curated persona. The centerpiece of this lavish absurdity was the incredible heart-shaped swimming pool. It was tiled in shimmering gold, and at the bottom, the words, "I love you, Janie," glinted under the Los Angeles sun. For Hollywood's most curious figures, the house was utterly irresistible. It was a place where fantasy seemed to leap off the screen and into everyday life. It was a declaration of unabashed, spectacular femininity in a conservative era, a deliberate act of theatrical excess. Mansfield's parties were designed to be less about quiet cocktails and more about pure spectacle. Guests arrived expecting laughter, music, and an all-access tour of the house itself, which was as much of an attraction as the star. Reporters who attended described stepping into another world, part Barbie dreamland, part Hollywood shrine, with Mansfield presiding as hostess in her trademark pink gowns, perfectly embodying the spirit of excess. The constant flow of curious visitors and press made the Pink Palace Hollywood's most unconventional public attraction, a living museum of kitsch and glamour. The contrast between the soft pink interior and the hard glamour of Hollywood was deliberate and unforgettable. It may have seemed like mere kitsch to the more reserved members of society, but Mansfield knew precisely what she was doing. Her parties, with their unabashed display of wealth and femininity, powerfully reinforced her image as a star who embraced grandeur and turned her private life into compelling public theater. The Pink Palace also represented a sharp contrast to the era's more traditional film icons. Where stars like Greta Garbo retreated into silence, Mansfield celebrated visibility. Where Humphrey Bogart sought simplicity, Mansfield demanded over-the-top, undeniable spectacle. She had a deep personal commitment to her own creation, the unreserved, flamboyant superstar. Sadly, when Jane Mansfield's life concluded prematurely in 1967, the Pink Palace took on an undeniably eerie afterlife. For years, it remained a curiosity, visited by fans and photographers, a stark, colorful monument to a life cut tragically short. Later, other celebrities would inhabit its famous walls. The memory of the Pink Palace served as a vivid, pink-hued tombstone to the era of Hollywood's most overt showmanship. But for those who remembered it at its height, the Pink Palace was unforgettable. It was a home where even the wallpaper seemed to blush, and where Hollywood's strangest, most flamboyant fantasies came to life in spectacular shades of rose. The ultimate irony of the Pink Palace was that its architect was only one part of the story. In the great Hollywood narrative, there was often a hidden figure pulling the strings, much like the unseen hand that orchestrated the glittering social world of Marian Davies. From the dazzling diamonds of Elizabeth Taylor to the strange silence of Howard Hughes, these incredible gatherings remind us that Hollywood's most dramatic scenes often happened off-screen. Thank you for watching this journey into cinema history. If these untold stories fascinated you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel now so you never miss another peek behind Hollywood's velvet curtain. Until next time, keep the golden memories alive.